Okay, happy Friday and a happy March Madness to all who celebrate and those who just kind of pop in, drop $5, 10, 20 maybe, put in a bracket. We're not here to talk basketball. We're here to talk some football and making a little history on the Pats Interference Podcast, part of the Mannerly and Marketable, tell your friends, CLNS Media Network. Brian Barrett is back with us to power rank the AFC. Now, I can hear your cries already. Callahan, the draft isn't here. The offseason's not over. A.J. Brown is still not yet a Patriot. How could you possibly power rank the AFC when A.J. Brown is not a Patriot, vaulting them clearly to number one? To which I say, get your own podcast. And Brian Barrett, I would say this exercise is also a little bit harder than I expected when I texted you saying, hey, why don't we do this tomorrow? Because as much as we all looked at the playoff picture, 2 months ago, and we're like, I don't know, it's like a morass of good but not great teams. We're still kind of in that, living that world, no?
Yeah, especially considering some of the injury situations, right? In terms of, I didn't really know where to put the Chiefs because I don't know when Mahomes is coming back. And there's a bunch of teams here that lost guys in free agency. There's also Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I had a difficult time with them. Where am I putting them in these rankings? Because was it just all the injury? And I'll save some of this for when we get into the Ravens. But Lamar, obviously, when he was on the field, didn't look like the same guy that he's been in previous seasons. And then there's kind of a glaring hole with the Patriots, and the Broncos are a really good team. But then you're like, wait, do the coach and the quarterback hate each other? I don't know what's going on there. Then that could be a problem.
Is that bad? Is that bad?
Kind of
for a team functioning, trying to win a championship? Yeah, look, I think you and I are going to have a lot of similar teams, but I want to make something clear to everyone listening now. This is not who we think has the best odds of winning the AFC. These are like the best teams as we see on paper because, as we all know by now, having covered the 2025 Patriots, strength of schedule is a huge factor. Team health is a huge factor. The latter, you can't really predict. In the former, we can kind of get a grasp on doing the over-under win totals that are currently projected, but ultimately, no one saw the Patriots' soft schedule, which you all knew last spring, being as soft as it was last year. It doesn't take away from the fact they made the Super Bowl run. It's just to say that, like, going into the playoffs, you probably had to make a case for the Patriots being the best team in the AFC. And even then, Broncos fans would certainly disagree. Not that they're going to be on this show anytime soon, if ever, because of how they lost that AFC Championship game with a backup quarterback. Anyway, this is, again, not about odds. It's about the best teams on paper. Now, I said I think we will have some overlap here where we both do a top 8. Here are 6 I would be shocked if they're not on your list. You ready? Ravens, Bills, Broncos, Texans, Jaguars. Are we 6 for 6? Good?
I have all those in there. Yep.
Okay. Yep. My last 2 are the Chiefs and the Chargers. Are we 8 for 8?
Yeah, but you said the Patriots, right, at first, when you gave out those first 6?
Yeah, if I didn't, they're on the list.
Yes, I do. So you said Chiefs. Yeah, I have the Chiefs. I have the Chiefs as my last team.
Okay. Well, let's just start right there. I agree. The Chiefs right now, as I will list, as we often did in previous pods, certain things that are going to kind of shape my thinking here. The Chiefs right now, their over-under win total is 10.5. I list these not to say, again, like that's the exercise that we're doing, but I do it to say that the win totals projected do consider certain things like injuries or free agency or trades in the way that weighted DVOA, which I'll also say for every team, does not. Their offensive rating by DVOA does not. And the reason I mention offense is because that's the stickiest thing year to year, as we hear from our pal Aaron Schatz. Like, defense is highly reliant on your opposing schedule, or offense, you got a good quarterback, you've got a good offense year to year. So the Chiefs are projected for 10.5 wins. That is the second highest total on this list, trailing only Baltimore, that's projected for 11.5 wins, and tied with Buffalo at 10.5. Everyone else that we just listed, all of the other teams, which include the Steelers and Bengals and Colts for reasons I don't really want to explain, is at 9.5. The Chiefs, though, last year finished 25th by weighted DVOA, meaning at the end of the season, their DVOA, when you weigh their last games more heavily, and I know Mahomes missed the last 3, they were a bottom 10 team in football. Their offense finished 12th. So that's a reason for hope. I still just think, as apparently you do too, this idea that we should vault them to having the 4th best odds of winning the AFC next season, ahead of the Patriots, And one more win ahead of the Patriots is insane to me. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So there's a couple of things here. First of all, as we all know, Mahomes is coming off an injury. So I'm not so sure why it's 10.5 if we don't know exactly when Mahomes is actually going to be back on the field. He's coming back from a torn ACL. Maybe this is a Jason Tatum-like return and he comes back quicker than we anticipated. But I also think there's the other aspect with Mahomes. And I know this is going to sound like blasphemy to talk about Mahomes this way, but he's entering his 31-year-old season. And you could say, yeah, well, look at all these quarterbacks playing well into their mid-30s, and in the case of Tom Brady, into his early 40s. I just don't know how well Mahomes is going to age. A, he's coming off a serious knee injury. And then B, this isn't sort of the Tom Brady obsessed with his health type of guy. He had this article a couple of years ago about the diet that he eats, and he's eating basically like candy all the time and stuff along those lines. He's not the most fit guy in the world. And obviously you don't want your quarterback to be jacked. We've seen how that has sort of hurt you in the past. But you think about sort of his escapability too, right? Where he's such a good athlete throwing on the run. So I don't think he's going to age the way Brady does, where maybe a couple of years from now, we're like, oh yeah, Mahomes isn't in the conversation as one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's the first aspect. I do think he's coming back from an injury. Maybe there's a slight dip from the player that he was. The other thing, just in terms of the positive aspect of this, the other team I considered is the Bengals. And I'm like, well, there's a likelihood that Mahomes actually plays more games than Joe Burrow. Now, they lost their pass rusher and Trey Hendrickson and all that. But the Kenneth Walker thing is interesting to me. And I think Andy Reid's sort of genius as an offensive play caller has dipped over the past couple of years. But bringing in Kenneth Walker, and then what Justin Fields is like on the team, like, are they going to have this until Mahomes gets back? If Mahomes isn't ready, whenever his timeline is, are they going to have like this offense for a month that people can't figure out? And by the time they figure it out, now they bring back Patrick Mahomes. Like, there is a chance that that could happen. Obviously, their defense has not been what it is in previous seasons, but I think just for respect of the previous dynasty, or the dynasty, maybe they keep it going. But the team that has won 3 Super Bowls, I'm going to put them 8th, even though I don't feel too convinced that this is going to be a good football team.
So that is the proper benefit of the doubt that I think everyone failed to properly calibrate last year, when you're like, oh, they'll figure it out. And I was guilty of this too, don't get me wrong. But this is a 6-11 football team last year, and they were 6-8 when Mahomes got injured, and then lose that game to the Chargers at home and go 6-9. The issue for me with them is that their core is old and frankly bad. Like, the 3 guys who are still on the team most responsible for that dynasty run that everyone cites is like, oh, they'll figure it out and they'll get it done. Mahomes, obviously, you mentioned with the injury. He's only 31. Age is not an issue. Even if he comes back, I bet he finds his form midseason fine. Kelsey's in year 14, who we saw with a precipitous drop-off last year. And then Chris Jones, who will go to the Hall of Fame one day, but I don't think it's going to be for his 2026 season, surrounded by a defense that just lost Trent McDuffie as perhaps its best player last year. Not to mention, this 6-11 football team was the 4th healthiest team in football, according to adjusted games lost by FTN Fantasy. So it's cool that they got Kenneth Walker, who I like a lot. And Gilman's a nice safety and a piece for them to add in the back end. But like, I look at this team and go, okay, they're 12th in offense, and they're pretty average at running and passing by the numbers last year. And again, I know Mahomes' absence drags those down. Defensively, they had an issue of not getting pressure when they blitzed. They definitely didn't get pressure when they only rushed 4. I don't love their weapons with Rashid Rice, Xavier Worthy, old pal, former guest in the show, Tyquan Thornton, I guess is going to start for them. So 10.5, we know that's driven partly by the market, right? Like, people just see the Chiefs and Mahomes and they bet and they buy low and low schedule, and part of that factors in. But just looking at them on paper, I'm absolutely with you. And I frankly thought I would be alone on this. So I'm a little bit bummed that we agree. Well, I slot them even behind a team like the Jaguars.
Well, and the other thing I'd say too, Callahan, is there's not a lot of young promise on this team, where if you think about the Patriots' second dynasty, and look, they were really good the whole time, but when they started winning Super Bowls again, you think about they had some bad drafts and then they hit, right? When you're thinking about the Gronk draft, you get Gronk and McCourty in the same draft, and then they play in the Super Bowl with one of the worst defenses that has ever made it that far. And then what happens after that is you trade up twice. You get Chandler Jones and you get Dante Hightower. Chandler Jones, of course, a huge part of the first Super Bowl. And then Hightower made big plays throughout. So they sort of were able to they basically built a whole new team around Tom Brady. And I know that some of the pieces have gone out with the Chiefs, but basically they have to create a new core the way that the Patriots did, where the new core became Edelman and Gronk, and they always had a good offensive line with the Toonies of the world, right? And
Yeah,
they
McCourty,
sold
Hightower. Yep.
Yeah, they hit. And look, I know Belichick's draft slipped at the end, but they hit on some really important pieces that were sort of pillars of the organization for that second run. And I think I've said it on this pod. Devin McCourty's the most underrated player, I think, in Patriots history, because we think about the offense all the time with the second dynasty. But the Chiefs have to do that, and they don't have a lot of good young talent on the team right now.
Well, and they did in 2022. Like, in complete fairness to Brett Veach, their GM, who was obviously, really locked into the show. It's just to say that the likelihood he does that again. Trent McDuffie was that first round pick in 2022, and you go through the whole class. It was hit after hit after hit, and they do, to their credit, also play really well with young corners that Steve Spagnuolo seems to get more out of than any other defensive coordinator in the league. Another future Hall of Famer. But when those blitz numbers are what they are, as a guy who's known for those creative blitz packages, there's also reason to think, is he losing his fastball a little bit? So, like, all of this faith in the Chiefs, again, is warranted for what they have in the past. But if you didn't learn the lesson from last year about why they made their fall, again, they were 6-8 going into the game when Mahomes got hurt. It wasn't just that they lost a ton of close games, and they did. It's just the talent isn't there anymore, and that's what was driving them all along, not just this sense of inevitability that we always had around Mahomes. Yes, he was that good, but he had enough help around him, and obviously that wasn't the case last year, and I don't think will be this year. Who do you have at number 7?
All right, so number 7 for me should have been higher. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars. So
okay, we're 2 for 2.
Okay, so the reason I have them here is, first of all, Callahan, I was looking back because I was thinking to myself, I remember watching that playoff game, of course, in the Josh Allen turnover against Denver in the next round. But I remember watching the first round when the Bills actually won. And I was thinking, wasn't there like a big controversy about the play calling in that game? And yeah, there was. They only ran, and this is not a small number, but they ran 23 times for 6.7 yards. Why didn't they just keep running? Why did Lawrence throw the ball 30 times? And I know he's the former number 1 pick and all that. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a serviceable quarterback, but he's not in the elite category. So if something's working, why do you go away from it? So I just didn't like the coaching in that. And then the other thing I would look at too is they were 5th in EPA per play on defense. Like, they had some really good numbers, but if you look at one of the things that sort of helped them during that, they were 2nd in the NFL last year in turnovers and takeaways. So that's something that we've seen historically does regress. Now, when you're in a season and it keeps happening, you're like, yeah, they're like the Bears. You're probably going to keep riding it, like the Jaguars last year. Like, yeah, it can work in one season, but that's one of the things that doesn't carry over more than maybe any other statistic in the NFL is the turnovers from year to year. And unless you're the Bears in the 2000s when they had Peanut Tillman just punching it out of everybody's hands. But the other thing I'd say about this team is their offense was still pretty good. And that was with Brian Thomas Jr. having really no impact, which I think that's the strangest thing because he was so good as a rookie. And then he just completely fell off in year 2. Yet they bring in Jacoby Myers, who turns out to be like an incredible player for Trevor Lawrence. And I think part of it is just his route running and the way that he can get into the intermediate portion of the field. And I think that's an area where clearly Lawrence was really comfortable throwing the football to. And he's a really reliable receiver in terms of, exactly where he's going to be on his route. So I think that was a big pickup for them. And then on defense, as I mentioned, like some of these numbers, maybe they regress from a turnover perspective, but I also think that, and I did not think this is a good idea to do it, but they traded up to go up and get Hunter. And Hunter, of course, is dealing with the injury last season, and they're trying to figure out what his role is going to be. Maybe if you just say, hey, let's just make, and it appears they're going in this direction, maybe he can be a legitimate top 15, 10 corner. I mean, that would be the hope considering where you drafted him. Maybe he can be that and be a shutdown corner to help this defense. So even if you don't have the turnovers you did a year ago, he's one of the best athletes we've ever seen play college football, and he had a great college career as a corner. So I think that could actually aid their defense if they don't get that turnover luck. But I've never been the biggest guy in terms of like a Lawrence fan, but I do think there is something to Cohen. Like, Cohen's a really good play caller. I just think he lost his mind in that playoff game.
It's tough, man. Look, I think we have them properly slotted. Also, just because they've stood pat, maybe more than any other team in the NFL throughout free agency, and they did lose Devin Lloyd to Carolina, which I don't think is nothing. As a guy in the middle of their defense, finally lived up to his draft status and was making plays in coverage, was making plays as a blitzer. Like, it's just a really good linebacker, and I think the analytics community is kind of coming back to like, oh, maybe these guys are kind of important, playing at the second level, affecting all levels of the defense, whereas before it felt like they were replaceable. I don't think that player is as replaceable as maybe some optimistic Jaguars fans feel. The reason I feel for them is that when explaining their lack of activity in free agency, James Gladstone, their GM, goes, well, we're really concerned about those 2027 comp picks. I go, okay, I can't really slot you higher in 2026 when you have the same roster. And look, some of the numbers are encouraging, but when you're thinking about 2027, here are those numbers. They had the 4th highest rating last year by weighted DVOA after the playoffs. So that's after a wild card exit. They go on the road, as we all saw, and beat Denver, and I think it was December. Like, this was a team that was really starting to build to something. I just don't have as much faith in a team that is just kind of staying put. Like, the case is continuity, both for and against, and how you look at this. I look at this and go, you were the 7th healthiest team in football last year. I think there's something real there. But most of the teams we're about to get to got better from last season. And I would include the Patriots in that mix. So, they have the 8th best odds of winning the AFC. I think that's fair. Again, that bakes in, schedule and other things we're not considering here. But they also had the 14th best offense by DVOA. And so if that's the stickiest number year to year, more so than your finish by weighted DVOA, I just go like, yeah, you're a good team. And I think it's probably a little bit more likely you're a little worse next year than you are better. So that's why they're 7th.
Yeah.
Number 6.
Go ahead.
Final thought?
Well, I was just going to say, my one other thing I'd say in terms of that offensive number is I think there is an argument that maybe year 2, Lawrence is better because remember in Cohen's system, because remember at the beginning of the season, it didn't look good and it felt like at times they figured it out. And now having the full year with Jacoby Myers in the fold, I think that could help him from that perspective, just because that's his most reliable guy.
Yeah, no, I hear you. These next 2 teams, I think, were the closest that I had of any 2 that go back to back. And it's, again, these are all really, really close teams. But the fact that one beat the other late in the regular season, as silly as it might sound as a tiebreaker, is what broke it for me. I have the Chargers at 6 and the Texans at 5. Are you in the same neighborhood?
Let me see here. Yes. So I have the Chargers as number 6 on my list.
God.
I actually have a different team at number 5.
Okay. All right. Let's sink into the Chargers then. Mike McDaniel is their offensive coordinator. I think flat out is one of the best additions any team made anywhere this offseason. We all saw what he did with Tua in Miami. Life is never going to be easier for Justin Herbert with his first reads being open, a diverse run game, where you can see in terms of player additions, they really focused and emphasized to say, look, if we can't count on Justin Herbert to be Superman, which is an unfair ask when he's getting hit more than any quarterback in football last year, we might as well run the hell out of the ball, which is what Jim Harbaugh wants to do anyway. Alec Ingold at fullback, Charlie Kohler at tight end, Keaton Mitchell's the new running back over there. Tyler Biadasz is now their new center. And, I don't love Cole Strange as a starting right guard, and they need to find an answer at left guard. But Joe Alt coming back and Rashawn Slater at their offensive tackle spots is just such a help that lets them breathe doing everything offensively as opposed to worrying about getting 4 yards when they want to run the ball. Or Justin Herbert having more than 0.4 seconds to throw the ball when he drops back to pass. I think this will help them in January and alleviate the fact that, again, they just don't have the weapons that most of the other teams in this list do. Defensively, ton of continuity minus losing Jesse Minter, which I think is significant. But again, you get to the injuries part, and I think they were better than what they showed last year, which these are some of the most discouraging numbers on this list, if not the most. They were the 17th best team in football by weighted DVOA and then 22nd in offense year to year. I just think McDaniel carries that alone schematically. Not to mention Greg Roman is everybody knew had issues designing a passing game. I think that change of going from a subpar offensive coordinator to an excellent one is not just like, oh, you got a better coach. You went from a below average offensive coordinator to a good one. That's a big, giant leap that's going to carry everyone with him.
Yeah, and I would say, and this is not an apples to apples comparison, but Roman had gotten to the point where his offense was stale like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Like, we love what he did with Kaepernick, and then he was great with Lamar Jackson, and then John Harbaugh said, we got to change. That happened years ago, that they had to make a change, and Lamar got better as a passer and the passing offense became more dynamic in Baltimore when they moved on from Greg Roman. Not to say that he wasn't right at the beginning, but that fit just because he knew Harbaugh. That's the only reason he was the offensive coordinator. That fit made no sense considering who the quarterback was. So I do think it's sort of like when Steve Kerr took over the Warriors for Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson was running like post-ups for Klay Thompson. It's like, what are we doing here? And then Steve Kerr comes in with this beautiful game and guys are running all over the place. It's like, yeah, let's weaponize the best shooter in the league right now. Let's have him running around. So it's just like the offense just made a lot more sense. And I think, to your point, say what you want about Mike McDaniel as a head coach. We saw what he can do with a inferior quarterback to Herbert and Tua when they had it rolling. I know they had great weapons there, but I think there's just going to be so much more design. We know there's going to be a lot more motion than there has been previously. And one guy that I would look at is McConkey. He does a great job of sort of getting guys in space and give them the ability to do things after the catch. And to what you mentioned, they had basically the worst offensive line, one of the worst offensive line situations in the NFL. And it's not just like, hey, we got to go out and find some guys that can play well. They have two of the best tackles in the league. On paper, this should be a good offensive line, especially at the tackle position. And I think Herbert's a really good player. And I would have put this team higher. I understand what you said about the defense. I was impressed with the defense, especially throughout the season, in terms of they just like don't really make mistakes. It feels like it's a really disciplined defense. So maybe that takes a step back without Minter in the fold. But I still think it's a veteran group too, with the Derwin Jameses of the world. The one thing that sort of stopped me from putting this team higher, and I know we're looking at the regular season. I love Herbert. How can anybody trust him in a big game? Like every time this guy has a big game, he looks awful. And I get it. Like he was dealing with some bad situations last year, but it felt like, okay, they'll beat the teams they're supposed to beat. And I know they beat the Chiefs to start the season, but then the teams that are like where they have to step up in competition, I don't trust that they're going to play at that level. I think there is something to that with Herbert. Now, maybe McDaniel unleashes that, but I think we have to wait and see on that. But
he also just missed plenty of open guys early in that game against New England, where you could see him really like it was teetering in the first half, and then he just broke in the second. And I think there's probably some cumulative effect of that, where again you just get hit so often, you start to expect it, and you start to flinch. Which maybe that's alleviated, maybe it's not. But I think what they'll do, and probably already have done with McDaniel in the building, things are going to be much better in structure, right? Like things are just going to be more efficient and easier and open and complementary with a really diverse and good run game. Out of structure is where you need Herbert to maintain who he's been, because I think the issues are in the pocket when guys get close is when he kind of breaks down. If you can marry a much better offense in structure with what he's able to do outside, which is still special, that's where I think you start to cook. But for them, I mean, they're also the Chargers. Like we have to bake in just the history of this franchise and how nothing ever seemed to go right for them. Injuries, coaching, quarterback, meltdowns, whatever. And yet they have the third best odds of winning the AFC with a win total projection of 9.5 as their over under. So that's another one I don't get. I see the talent. I understand it. I thought they would do more in free agency, frankly, with the offensive line and maybe a receiver. But, we all know the market there wasn't booming with difference makers. They just had a lot of cap space and they didn't end up using it. But I think we have them fair. So you didn't have Houston at 5. Who did you have at 5?
Baltimore.
Yeah, that's another close one. I had them at 4. So we just flipped these 4-5. Talk me into why the Texans are better than the Ravens as we get into both.
Okay, so I'll start with the Texans portion of this. I could not have been more impressed with the defense last year. That defense is absolutely terrifying. Will Anderson and Hunter, they gave him a big 1-year contract to come back. Those guys just dominated the Patriots, and they dominated all season. For most of the year, those two guys ranked in the top 3 in win rate, and they were on the same team. The guy that was in there with them was Myles Garrett, the defensive player of the year. And so the defense, they also have one of the best corners in the league in Stingley. So I feel like entering this season, I said it before the Super Bowl, I know that if you look at Seattle's defense, like some of the numbers favor Seattle, but I thought the Texans were the best from a personnel perspective in terms of what they could do defensively. They just have great players on their team to go along with a good defensive coach. The offense is where you have some concerns, because I don't understand what happened to CJ Stroud. He came onto the scene and he looked like the next great quarterback, to the point where the year after that, he's going up to Caleb Williams after a game and telling him, hey, just keep going, bro. Just keep going, bro. Trying to give him advice as if he was like Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen or something along those lines, or Lamar Jackson. It was so weird that he did that. And ever since that, he has not been, I don't know if the two things are connected, but you look at them, they were 30th in rush EPA last year. They could not run the football whatsoever, but they bring in David Montgomery. I don't think he's a huge difference maker anymore, but I do think, all right, at least it's a solid veteran that has had some success and great mentality too. They have a legitimate bona fide number 1 receiver. Nico Collins is an absolute stud. And I actually like some of their young guys in the receiving core as well. I really like Higgins. So the question with them is going to be protecting the quarterback. But if you're looking at sort of the units in the AFC, I think you can make a real convincing argument that the Texans on paper have the best unit in the entire AFC when you look at their defense. So that's why I put them ahead of the Ravens. I'm concerned about the offense. That's why this team is not higher. But the reason I put the Ravens behind them is for a couple of reasons. First of all, maybe I'm just upset about the whole situation with Max Crosby because I thought that was BS what they did. They clearly got to the point where they said, we can get somebody that's like 80% of the guy and we don't have to give up any draft picks. That's what they did. And now they could be in the sweepstakes for A.J. Brown, because they have those first-round picks now, which I think is scary from a Patriots perspective. But I do think we have to be cautious with this team, because if you look at Derrick Henry, he's entering his 32-year-old season. And maybe he just never slows down. He's like a freak. I saw he doesn't eat until 5 o'clock every day. I do some intermittent fasting too, but I'm surprised that a guy that size doesn't eat until 5 o'clock. That seems crazy to me. But 300 carries each of the last 2 seasons. Is this the year that he sort of falls off a little bit? And is this a year that, hey, maybe he deals with some injuries? And then
wait, we can't sit past Derrick Henry's fasting until 5 p.m. in the afternoon, because that man is not only giant and probably gets up at 5 a.m. So that's 12 hours. Did it also, whatever piece this was, or Instagram reel, mention how many calories he eats from 5?
Well, here we go.
Probably 8?
I'm going to use my AI right now to read it to you. So his plan excludes gluten, dairy, fried foods, artificial sugars, focusing on lean meats, rice, and veggies, often waiting until 4 or 5 p.m. to eat during the season. Typically eats 2 large meals a day, around 4 to 5 p.m. and another later around 8 p.m. Typical meal: 3 chicken breasts, rice, broccoli. Another favorite is gluten-free pancakes, scrambled eggs, home fries, and steak. It actually doesn't sound bad, Callan. It sounds kind of boring, but it doesn't sound bad. I like eggs.
I could not fathom waiting until 5 p.m. every day to eat. I would be the grouchiest MFer that has ever sat on a Patriots podcast and hosted it.
I actually do it most days. I do it most days.
Really?
Like Monday through Thursday. Yeah, I ordinarily don't eat anything till after 5 o'clock. I've done a couple of, I've never done the 72, but I've done like over 60. It got to the point, like, you're not supposed to be doing a lot when you're on those. And so like the first 2 days
like
I could
playing
work out
NFL football.
Yeah. No, but it's supposed to be good for a lot of things, the fasting. And the last day that I was on it, I'm like, I went to the gym. I'm like, I can't even do anything. I'm just going to break this. So I broke the fast so I could actually work out. I'd rather do that than take the day off. But yeah, I'm an intermittent fasting guy. Usually on the weekends, I'm a little bit different because, so there's games going on, all that stuff. So yeah, I could be a little bit different on the weekend. But during the week, Monday through Thursday, I'm usually something I won't eat probably until after 5 p.m.
That's crazy to me. I'm more of a eat to live person than I live to eat. Like, this is not, I wake up and I'm thinking of what I'm going to have that day. But that is, more insane for Derrick Henry, given what he does for a living. We're like, okay, I know you run, but I could get it. That's not, I'm going to need more time than we have to think about that, process that for both of you. But let's go there. I had the Ravens higher for this reason, is that I think what we saw last year from that offense is probably the worst we'll see from them in a while. And I understand Lamar's illness just seems to pop up at the worst times every single year. But there's something about a coaching change that I think is going to bring about not only just a new energy for them, but new ideas and an urgency that says, like, you can only fire so many more coaches now, and specifically offensively. Like, they've had 4 offensive coordinators at least for Lamar Jackson. At some point, it's on the players. And so for him, Mark Andrews, I get, is older. Henry, I get, is older. This is still a good offensive line, even without Linderbaum. I like the receivers. And so for an offense that was 11th last year, with Lamar Jackson missing a handful of games, that to me is still a big gap and counting on a bump compared to a Texans team that was 21st on offense. And I know the defense here, as you laid out at the beginning, is going to make up for some of that gap. It's really close again. But to me, like Stroud being a mystery box where the only options are bad and you're just crossing your fingers that, like, it's just neutral. I can't count on a team like that, especially when they signed Braden Smith and he's the right tackle, and Wyatt Teller's going to play left guard. Like, cool. I didn't see a lot from Nick Caley, who did have some limitations because of Stroud, elevating them in year 2 as a play caller. And for them not to address the offensive line as much as I thought they should have, I don't see them getting to an above average offense unless we see CJ Stroud, a version of him we've not seen, frankly, in 2 years.
Yeah, the Stroud thing is interesting. I just leaned on sort of the Texans defense over sort of the Ravens offense and comparing Stroud to Lamar, because I also do think we have evidence, recent NFL evidence, like going to the Super Bowl last year. You don't need to have the best quarterback, one of the best 3 quarterbacks in the league anymore, which it felt like that was the case forever. You always needed to have that guy. You have exceptions to the rule every once in a while. Unfortunately, we all know what happened in 2017, some Eli seasons in there, but a lot of them are Brady, Manning, Mahomes, Breeze back in the day. And so I think that if you look at sort of the comp between Stroud and Lamar, the one thing I would say with Lamar is he's entering his 29-year-old season. He only ran for 26 yards a game last year. And clearly, we all know that he was dealing with injuries. But I'm just wondering how that prototype of quarterback ages, because we really don't have anybody like Lamar in the NFL. And we really, historically, the closest guy is Michael Vick. And I know that he's sort of different because I look at Cam Newton. Cam Newton was a big guy that was taking on linebackers and such, right? So the hit total was higher for Cam Newton. But in terms of, all right, if he just loses a little bit of his athleticism, is he still the same dynamic player? Because I do think the threat of his legs, and this is not to take away from the other stuff he does, but I think that really, really benefits him in the passing game, where you look at some of his numbers, it's not like high totals, but he's always top tier in terms of passer rating and yards per attempt. And I think a lot of that opens up because of his threat and his ability to run. And if he just loses some of that, what does that offense look like? And I do think that there's a possibility that, hey, maybe it wasn't just the injuries. And the other element, well, if it was the injuries, are those going to continue to pile up now? And a guy that relies on his athleticism so much. So I just think there is a case that we don't get back to MVP level Lamar. Like 2 years ago when Allen won it over him, that was probably his best season. And the year before that, he played at an insane level. I think there's a chance that he's not the same guy anymore.
The other part about that case is his offensive coordinator, who I mentioned, like, look, you should feel more onus and urgency. Declan Doyle came from the Bears staff last year and had previous stops before that, but is regarded as like, if there's a Ben Johnson 2.0, he's it. He just turned 30 and obviously was on Ben Johnson's staff last year. But I don't historically like the first year head coach running with first year coordinators, because there's not enough new ideas. There's not enough experience or a well of experience to be like, oh, we saw this front or this blitz or, this passing concept in, 2012, and this is how we solved it, in the way that, like, we all saw Josh McDaniels grow into the offensive coordinator he is now, but struggle most notably in that 07 Super Bowl against the Giants. All of which is to say that, like, look, there's a lot of newness here that I do think will help them. Like, Jesse Minter is going to solve a lot of issues defensively, and that was really their biggest problem aside from Lamar's health, which was most of the year. But offensively, I do wonder, as smart as they might be, it's the in-game stuff and the ability to get to those answers quickly. It's not sitting on a whiteboard. Like, I'm sure they have as many ideas as anybody, but in-game, how good are you under pressure now as the play caller, now as the head coach who's managing the game and additioning to running the defense? So maybe you swayed me here, because, like, I don't love DeMeco Ryans as an in-game manager, but clearly there's a floor here, even with his quarterback sometimes playing for the other team, as it looks like. And the Ravens also do get kind of a bump here, I think, analytically, in the way, just something about the style and the things that they value. Like the Celtics always being a 3-point heavy team. Vegas is going to love the Celtics forever because they play an analytical type of game. So the Ravens having the second best odds to win the AFC, an 11.5 win total, which is, again, highest in the conference, I think is a bit high. And the Texans finishing 5th by weighted DVOA while they were 9th. Like, okay, I could see it. This is really coin flip territory for me. I just kind of leaned better into the quarterback and what I think Jesse Minter will do for the Ravens defense. But pound for pound, Texans might be more talented because this Ravens roster is not as good as it was last year, I think.
Dude, the Texans are loaded, and you got to give Nick Caserio credit, because it looked like at points,
happily,
yeah. Does he know what he's doing? And then think about and like I said about Stroud, obviously did not have the same season that you were expecting last year, but getting Stroud and Anderson in the same draft, I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, those should be 2 franchise pillars, and I still think Stroud's like a really talented quarterback. I don't think he's on sort of like the Drake level where He's great. Like Drake is, we don't have to talk about Drake, but he's incredible throwing on the move, all that. He's a super athlete. Stroud's not that. I think he's like a tier down from that. But going back to what I was mentioning, is like Sam Darnold just got his team to the Super Bowl because they had a loaded roster around him. So I think they need to do more to sort of help him from an offensive perspective. And we'll see year 2 in the system and all that. And I do think they've done a good job giving him weapons on the outside. The line has been the big issue, but Collins and Higgins, and we'll see what they get from some of the other young guys they have on that roster. I think that there's at least sort of an avenue where you could see them, even if they're, say, the 12th best offense in the NFL, and then you're going to have a defense that is no worse than the 3rd best defense in the NFL. Like, that could be a pretty good formula, and we'll see if they can run the ball, because that would certainly help out Stroud. They couldn't do that at all last year.
I think you convinced me. I think you swayed me. I will flip the Texans to 4 and the Ravens back down to 5. And it's honestly some of the arguments I was making against the Chief, right? Like an older core that you're asking to sustain you. There's some, questions with the coaching. Everyone's like, oh, they signed Trey Hendrickson, and that's a big deal. But that's also someone who is a total liability in run defense. And with the Texans, they were the 7th most injured team last year by adjusted games lost. So they might have been better than they even showed us. And if they do get some positive regression from CJ Stroud, who I think, frankly, just has not improved, and that's been his biggest issue, right? And maybe this is an attitude thing. Maybe this is the structure around him, because he made Bobby Slowick look good as a rookie. And Slowick, I know, is an offensive coordinator, I think, in Miami now, but like wasn't as good as he was made out to be. And Nick Haley, again, I have my doubts about. Point is, you got me. We're on to the top 3. The Patriots, we agree, are a top 3 team in the AFC, but are they 1? Are they 2? Or are they 3? Which may get a certain host in trouble on his own podcast. Find out after this message from our friends at Prizepicks, who they don't have to remind you. March Madness is one of the best times of the year as the playoff push continues to heat up, and the NBA soon will too, by the way. But even if your bracket is already busted, puts both hands up, there's no better way to win money while you watch sports than with Prizepicks. And this is not only just the player lineups that we tell you about, 2 to 6 players. You pick a stat with that player. It gives you a number. You go more than, less than, lock it in, do that for 2 to 6 players. Boom, there you go. Right now at Prizepicks, you can get a lot more going with game winners, spreads, and totals. So cash in with all the clutch buckets and the slam dunks and the UConn victories at Prizepicks now. Download the app. You get your money in. You get your money out almost instantly whenever you do win. This is in more than 35 states right now. And also, as I've said before, if you do the traditional Prizepicks lineup where you get the players and the stats, you get more than less in. If you hit your first 3 picks and you got a 4-player lineup, you can cash out early. It's my favorite feature. So download the Prizepicks app today. Pick your first game winner, spread, or total as the playoff push rolls on and get $50 in daily fantasy lineups whenever you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's 50. $50 in daily fantasy lineups for your first $5 lineup when you use code, and this is the important part, CLNS. That's code CLNS to get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, it's good to be right. Number 3. Are you going to do it or am I? Who's going first here? Who's going to be braver than the other man?
So I actually went with the Bills.
Oh, okay.
I went with the Bills number 3. So I assume that means you had the Patriots number 3?
I do. Did I give that away?
Yeah. So do you want me to give you my take on why I have the Bills below the Patriots?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I do like the addition of DJ Moore for them. I know he's coming off his worst season, but obviously he didn't click in that system for whatever it's worth. Most guys do, which I do also think. I'm arguing with myself now. Oh, if he didn't work with Ben Johnson, like what's good? Ben Johnson's a mad genius. So maybe I don't like the Moore move as much as they do, but they needed to get another receiver in there. I really like Shakir. I think he's a good player. Kincaid's a good player. They don't have a true number 1. And I don't think Moore's that either, but it's just another weapon for Josh Allen. And then if you look at them in terms of their offense last year, they were number 2 of the NFL in rush success rate. Cook was one of the best running backs in the league last year. But they move on from McDermott. And here's the interesting component for me with this. It feels like, and I'm not defending him, I don't think he's a great coach, but was it his fault, or is the roster starting to get to a spot where it's not great anymore? Their rush defense was atrocious. That's why I was so mad at the Jaguars. Why didn't you keep running? They were 31st in rush EPA on defense. Now, I know they bring in Jim Leonard as the new defensive coordinator and all that, but I don't trust their front office anymore. I don't trust that they're going to have a good draft. And maybe, like I said, like the Moore pickup, but it's not like they've added a ton to that defense. I know that they dealt with a ton of injuries last year, but why should I think this team is going to be totally different from a run defense perspective? Their pass defense was good last year. We'll see if they can duplicate that. But I give McDermott credit for that. It's not like they had unbelievable personnel defensively, and I don't blame McDermott for the rush defense being so bad. So when I just look at it from that perspective, I think there's like a real major flaw on this Bills team, which I think the front office used to be really good. I don't think the front office is that good anymore. I don't trust that they're like, we're at the point now where Josh Allen is like having to be Superman at times. I know he got help in the run game.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. Like we're at that point that like the roster's just not as good. Like if we had this conversation like 3-4 years ago, we would be arguing the Bills have the best when those safeties were in their primes, when Diggs was in his prime with Buffalo. We'd be talking about this is the best roster of the NFL. I just don't see it anymore. Like how many true blue chip talents besides Josh Allen are on the team? Like Cook at the running back position. Certainly, I don't put Ed Oliver in that category anymore. Do you?
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Dawkins. Yeah, that's true.
Christian Benford's pushing there. I mean, Bradley Chubb, if healthy, is probably not consistently there, but there might be a version if he's around.
Yeah, if he can get back to the guy that he was.
Yeah.
But I don't love their roster. And we saw it last year, like when these teams matched up, the Patriots won the first game and they completely controlled the second game. I still cannot comprehend what happened in the second half of that game. Like they were up, 3 touchdowns?
Well, they didn't control it because they lost control of the game starting with the end of the second quarter is what happens. Like you could say they blew it, but not that they controlled the whole game because otherwise they would have won.
Yeah, that's true. They controlled the first 6 quarters of their Bills matchups.
So I have the Bills as the best team in the AFC. And
wow.
It's really this simple for me in a way that, again, we are splitting hairs in these power rankings. As I said at the beginning, this is a morass of still good, not great teams. The 2 best teams in football are still the Rams and the Seahawks, and they played in the NFC last time I checked. They have the best offense in the NFC, or the AFC, excuse me, the Bills do. That is the most consistent part year to year. They have the best quarterback who just added the best receiver he's had in a long time in DJ Moore, who I don't love, but I think is good enough now to allow the Bills to get to a place in a ceiling that they otherwise couldn't have gotten before. And the real reason that their offense was so good, even without a receiver like DJ Moore, is what you just highlighted. Their running game, which was as consistent and as effective as any in football. And it's mostly due to that offensive line, who is going to protect Josh Allen and clear room for James Cook. Now, defensively, I am putting a lot of faith in Jim Leonhard, who I think is an excellent coach, was a really sharp player, has gotten a lot of experience. He was a DC in college at Wisconsin, has been around Vance Joseph last year, obviously came up and played a lot in the Rex Ryan system. I think he will be an upgrade over what they had defensively. The question is, of course, when you talk about coaching in the Bills, is what the hell does Joe Brady, head coach, look like, aside from someone Brandon Beane wanted to work with, having successfully completed a power play in the Bills organization to get McDermott out and complete his job. And you're totally right in that I don't love the roster and that their front office has absolutely fallen off over the last few years. I just think, again, because of Josh Allen, the power of that player and the power of that position to get them basically a fumble away where his power worked negatively against them in Denver when Denver was healthy with Bo Nix playing that entire game. If you're a fumble away from winning on the road, they would have come to Foxborough as the favorite, a slim margin, and they might not have won. I don't know. I genuinely don't know who I would have picked. It probably would have been a coin flip. But they were favorites a couple of weeks earlier by 1.5 to 2.5, and they won that game in week 16. And I just think counting on the best player, the best quarterback, and the best offense that will be stickiest year to year. It's no surprise they have the best odds of winning the AFC, despite only being projected for 10.5 wins. And the Bradley Chubb piece, I think, might actually be one that works when they keep going to this well of the post-prime pass rusher. Like they just have a nursing home in Buffalo for these guys, whether it's Von Miller or Joey Bosa. And like, oh, come on in, Bradley Chubb. One of these has to work for them. And I think Chubb is it. And it's so close. But I just trust, again, an improvement on defense, the best quarterback, the best offense, and the thing that I think will be most consistent year to year for them. Even if the roster talent might be equal to the Patriots, they just have an edge in the biggest spot.
Yeah, it's a fair point on Chubb, because if you think about it, those other 2 guys that you mentioned, those guys were post-prime. Chubb should be and those guys were far more accomplished, like obviously in their career. Von Miller is one of the best pass rushers to ever play. But if you think about Chubb, he's at the age where he still should have his fastball. He's a guy that has just dealt with injuries. So if they can get him right from a health perspective, maybe he is the guy that makes it work. And it is tough for me to argue against Josh Allen. I mean, the guy's played at an insane level for the past 4 to 5 years. So it does make sense from that perspective. I actually would have rather seen that Bills team now that I think about it, even though when we power ranked like the opponents that you don't want to see, I think I had the Bills #1. But now that I think about it, all those defenses they played when the Patriots are having so much issues in terms of their offensive line, maybe the Bills would have been a better matchup. And maybe Drake would have been more confident going forward if they win that game, because we would have actually seen them have some success at least offensively, which we didn't see outside of like a couple of the Hunter Henry throw against the Chargers. I know he made some plays, but
maybe that's really where the problems that you saw in the playoffs first cropped up, right? Like it was some of the Bills' disguise. When you go back and look at that box score, I'm going to pull it up now because I think people do forget, and that they were like, oh, the Patriots gave that game away. They should have won. And like that can be true. Drake May did not have a great game that day. It was a lot of the running game, which again might carry over if the run defense, meaning Buffalo's, is just as bad as it's been. And Jim Leonard, who's been more of a passing game coordinator. But like if he's able to give Drake May problems, Drake May was 14 of 23 with an interception. No touchdowns in that game against the Bills. The Patriots did score 31. It's not lost on me. I just think there are things that Jim Leonard might be able to continue and carry over while improving other aspects in this new system for the Bills that could give May problems, and did in the playoffs, because you saw a lot of teams running cover 6, which the Bills did, and disguising in a way that had May, who will be better in year 3. Let's not have that point get lost in this discussion. But I think still be able to give him problems, even if they've made some big changes to their coaching staff.
Yeah, and the one other thing I'll say too is at least that was the game where they finally unleashed Drake as a runner in the first half. Remember, had 2 touchdowns running the football. I'm like, we've been waiting for this. Like, this has been at your disposal, and they waited for that big game to sort of let that happen and let Drake actually use his legs a little bit. So the reason I have the Patriots at 2, if I want to put like just to make the argument, I have them in front of them. Mm-hmm. So I actually really like the Vera Tucker move, because I just didn't see this one coming. Where, all right, the upside is he's the guard, your left guard for the foreseeable future. Any of the other guys that we were talking about that were going to be out there are like 1-year guys, right? Like Joel Bitonio, who's in his mid-30s. Vera Tucker could actually be like a staple for this team going forward if he can stay healthy. So I did kind of like the idea of, all right, we already have Brown on the roster, so let's go big game hunting and see if we can get a guy to perform at an elite level, especially considering we're going to be moving Wilson inside, which I do think that's wise to do, considering like that was his natural position at Georgia, to put him not inside, but move him from guard to center. He was the 8th ranked center in college football at Georgia, and he was playing in the SEC. I know, according to PFF, I know PFF isn't the be-all end-all, Callahan, but it's just he was a good center, and he's got really athletic traits. And then we'll see what Campbell can do in year 2. I think sort of gets lost, where I feel like that guy had like 8 seasons where before the year we're all like, wait, what's the arm like? Are we sure on this? I personally was like, I didn't love the pick, but I understood the pick. And then we got to the point where he's saying he'll die for the quarterback. Everybody loves him. He has like the one issue in the Raiders game where he's got the full start. But after that, it's like, whoa, he's been pretty solid. He's actually having a really good year. And then he gets the injury. You're like, oh, man, does this mean the Patriots are done? And Venarian Lowe comes in, he plays pretty well. And then when he comes back, it just, oh, dude, this guy stinks. We got to put him to guard. We got to sign a left tackle. So this guy's lived a million lives, but hopefully he can sort of step up his game in year 2. And we'll see. It's weird. He said it's weird that he's worse when he gets help. So I don't know what's going on there, but I am going to give him sort of, he was playing with a serious knee injury. And I'm sure if the Patriots were out of the playoff hunt, he wouldn't have come back last year. They would have just waited till the following season. So I think there is optimism that he can improve in year 2. And then the other thing I'll say is I do like bringing in Gilliam, who they took, of course, from the Bills, because if you think about Josh McDaniels going back to 18, when they sort of morphed the offense into this run-heavy thing, they had Devlin in there. And Devlin, you look at the snap count, was going up as that run went on, especially when you got to the Super Bowl. And I do think that could actually help Henderson in some aspects, where if he can just open up a little hole, there's like highlights of him opening up holes for James Cook. And I think we need to see more Travion Henderson, because we didn't down the stretch of the season, just because this league is so much about explosive plays now, not just explosive passes, but explosive runs. And Henderson can supply that more than Ramondre Stevenson. And obviously, naturally, he's got to improve as a pass protector. But the one thing I'll say too, the reason it's incomplete to me, and if they actually pull off the A.J. Brown trade, I would have had them in front of the Broncos, because I think we're finding out, we talk so much about the issues protecting the quarterback in the playoffs. you need the guy. You need the reliable receiver where you're saying Drake knows, hey, on third down, I'm going to this guy. Diggs was not that guy anymore, especially in the playoffs where he didn't even have 50 yards at a game. He had games where he was under 20 yards in the postseason.
He
AJ
had
Brown.
fewer yards in 4 games than Romeo Doubs had in one wild card playoff loss.
That's a great statistic. Yeah, Romeo Doubs went off. And I do like the Doubs edition. And I think he's going to be, he's more athletic, but I kind of compare him to Myers, like in terms of just a reliable guy, good route runner. Drake's going to know where he's going to be. But this is one thing that I was looking at. So I mentioned, like, you may not need the top 3 quarterback of the NFL to win anymore, the Super Bowl. We're seeing that if you look at this decade, you kind of need the number 1 receiver / weapon. So last year, obviously, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Not that
Wait,
he had
hold
a
on.
great.
Let me stop you there because you're about to help my case, which I have not made yet, and
Okay.
I feel obligated to explain as someone who teased, oh, maybe I don't think the Patriots are the best team, and lo and behold, I have them as the 3rd best team. And here comes the preamble that will probably be cut from the promo on Twitter that will inspire a very predictable reaction. The good news for the Patriots is that they were the 2nd best team in football by weighted DVOA at the end of last season, even with that Super Bowl performance. They were 6th on offense. Those numbers are important. Those numbers are sticky. They have the 5th best odds, according to Sportsbook, to win the AFC. I think that's not erroneous, but close. This is a top 3 team, no question. And if they get A.J. Brown, this is the best team in the AFC for what he will do for Drake May, mitigate problems with their protection, and alleviate pressure on all the other receivers. Dobbs gets to be a number 2. That's what he is. Pop Douglas or Booty gets to be a number 3. That's what they are. Here's the issue. The Patriots are going to run into problems this next season that they did not have to confront last year for reasons that were mostly outside of their control. And those are about injuries. This was the healthiest team in football. You saw the best version of the 2025 Patriots in every universe where the Patriots played a season in 2025. That is not going to happen again. And it's not just that, like, okay, a couple more guys will get banged up. They're thin at positions where you don't want to be thin. An injury right now to Harold Landry or Milton Williams all but sinks their 4-man pass rush. An injury to a Romeo Doubs or a Kayshon Boutte doesn't sink the receiving core, but really puts a dent in their ability to stretch the field. An injury to a Will Campbell or Morgan Moses, who's about to turn 35, has currently a practice squad player or a 7th round pick in line to start for however long Will Campbell or Morgan Moses are out. These are premium positions with exceptionally thin depth. And when you hear Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel talk about we're building as opposed to we're all in, baby, Super Bowl or bust, that is the exact reason why. They know they're going to be more banged up next season. It's just a matter of how banged up are they? Does it take them out of contention? Can they work around it? Can they problem solve? I trust this coaching staff a lot. I trust Drake May to be better. But they're still a player away, I think, from being definitively the best team in the AFC, even if it's so close between them, the Bills, and the Broncos. And that is the biggest reason why.
Yeah, and I think that player is A.J. Brown. And I just think there's too much smoke here, Caroline. And we know, like, the June 1st thing, what does it go? 40 million dead cap until 20 million dead cap.
I mean, I'm on the record. I think it happens. And I think more people are coming around to that. So,
yeah. Let me mention this real quick. So last 5 Super Bowl champs, JSN obviously didn't have a big Super Bowl, but he was the best receiver in the NFL last year, him or Puka. Year before that, A.J. Brown, future Patriot, A.J. Brown was there for, even though that wasn't a dynamic passing game, you had a guy that you could consistently throw the ball to. Now, 2023 Kelsey was not quite the same guy, but go look at his game log in the playoffs. He was incredible in that playoff run. And then Kelsey the year before that was still in his prime, and he was incredible that year, well over 1,000 yards. And then the year before that, Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown of receiving. He won the Super Bowl MVP. He was incredible that year. And then, of course, Brady's year. So you're looking at this decade. Brady's year, he had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Both those guys that year, and I think Godwin dealt with an injury that year, but both those guys are better receivers than anybody that was on the Patriots this year. I mean, I'm not saying Diggs' career, but Evans that year was one of the better receivers in the NFL. They also had Gronk, who came out of retirement and he had a really good Super Bowl, still a productive player. But my point being is you need one of those guys, because I just think, like, when you're preparing for the Patriots, especially those teams that had elite defenses last year, they faced all elite defenses when they got into the playoffs. What are they saying? Who are we taking away? Who are we concerned? Diggs? Hunter Henry? Who are we looking at here? When you look at the Patriots, they're preparing for the Seahawks. They're like, all right, we got to find a way. And they did, to their credit. We got to find a way to slow down JSN or when you're playing the Texans, hey, we got to find a way that Nico Collins cannot have a big afternoon. Like, you have guys that you got to be concerned about. Patriots don't have any of those guys. And even if you
they
look
didn't run the ball particularly well either. And Elijah Vera Tucker and Reggie Gilliam and a year 2 lead from Trayvon Henderson might alleviate that. Now, like, I don't want to go too far down this road. It's a good point and a salient one that you're making. Again, AJ Brown would fix and would vault them to number 1 for me, but they're not there yet. It's just a lot on Drake May. And if the playoffs taught us anything, is that right now in his career as a 23-year-old kid, you cannot count on him, even as an MVP runner-up, to paper over all of their problems against good defenses, because some of them are in protection and some of them were the receiving core. And I still would bank on some development from Campbell and Wilson and Kyle Williams, who I haven't even mentioned yet. But right now, what you would need is another version that you got last year, right? Super healthy, outperforming expectations from all your rookies and now second-year players to carry you to a place where, again, you're pushing for the Super Bowl. And so right now, the tiebreaker also for me with Denver, and I already talked about Buffalo, is that, look, when the AFC Championship game on the road is that close against a backup quarterback and the Broncos make a trade like they did for Jalen Waddle and Bo Nix gets healthy, I'm sorry, I just have to take that team for now. Even if, as I said, I like the Patriots a lot, and there are a lot of good underlying numbers, the health thing is just going to be an issue. Not to mention, and this is the last thing I'll say before I'll yield back to you, corner depth is something I'm also looking at. Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis. I don't know if I'd want another pair of corners in the entire league over those two. And if so, that list is 2 teams long. But with all due respect to the newly added Kindle Vildor, who sounds like he was signed from Middle Earth, I still don't know if Carlton Davis or Christian Gonzalez or even Marcus Jones gets hurt, that there's not an obvious place to pick in a defense that will probably have to blitz a lot like they did in the playoffs to sustain any type of pass rush.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kyle Williams in there. I'm so intrigued to see Williams next year because I thought it was fascinating that they talked about him a lot at the combine. I'm like, okay, they're really high on Kyle Williams, and I totally understand why. I mean, you go back to his final year, and I get it's at Washington State, but he was number 1 in the country in touchdowns against man coverage. And we saw at times, it felt like, and I think I'm just a little bit off on this, I think almost half his receptions were touchdowns, it felt like. So they got to find a way next year to weaponize that in terms of letting Kyle Williams get down the field. And if you get a true number 1 in here with them, that could certainly help when it comes to that. But yeah, I'm with you on the depth. I mean, we saw when Gonzalez came back and when Gonzalez and Milton Williams played together, they were basically unbeatable except one game in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. And Christian Gonzalez had an unbelievable Super Bowl. I thought he was awesome in that game. So having him, and you're right, like the combination is incredible. But it's just, okay, well, what happens if one of those guys ends up dealing with an injury? Because we've seen Davis historically has ordinarily dealt with an injury or two throughout a season, and Gonzalez, of course, to begin last year. But the reason I have the Broncos in front of the Patriots is, so obviously Drake, I believe, is better than Bo Nix. And I do think
you have them 1, Patriots 2, Buffalo 3.
Yeah.
Texans 4, Baltimore 5.
Yeah, their roster is just, their defense, we know they led the NFL in sacks. We saw it in that game, and I know it was snowing and all that. They have arguably the best corner in the NFL, a guy that's been the defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain. So you have a great corner, you have a great pass rush, and Harvey entering year 2. Maybe he takes a year 2 leap. Obviously not the rookie season that they were expecting from him. But I look at also, well, the Jalen Waddle move, even if I think that's an overpay, right? And that basically says you're definitely giving up a first for AJ Brown now, which I'm totally fine with. But like, if you look at Waddle, he's not a true number 1 receiver when you're talking about like the JSNs, the Pukas, the Jamar Chases, the Jeffersons, but he's really good. Like and the one thing that he has is super speed. And a couple of years ago, if you go back to 2023, when they really had that Miami thing rolling, he was almost 6 yards or 6 yak per reception. So he can make things obviously happen after the catch. And the reason I bring that up is just
it's an insane number for people who don't dive into these numbers as often as you and I do. That 6 yards after the catch is preposterous.
Yeah, it's insane. And the reason I bring that up specifically is just the fact that McDaniel was so good at scheming things up in Miami. Sean Payton, despite some of the things that he did in that AFC title game, he's one of the best schemers of offense in the NFL. And if he has a weapon like that and they're giving up what they did to get him, I think they're going to find a way to weaponize his speed. And that's the move that they made. Like, everybody's like, well, the Broncos did nothing. Well, they had a loaded roster. Their one glaring need was really receiver. And it just took them a little while to do it. So from a roster perspective, if you look at the construction of the roster, I don't think anybody in the AFC top to bottom, if you're talking about everything, I don't think anybody in the AFC, even if I'm not the biggest Bo Nix fan in the world, and I would take a lot of quarterbacks in the AFC over him, but I think he's good enough with that sort of type of team to make a run. We just saw him go all the way to the AFC title game before he sustained the injury in the divisional round. So when I add all those things up, I'm at the point now where I don't just rank the team based on the quarterback like I've done in the past after what we saw over the past couple of years, where some of these teams where they may not have the elite quarterback, they can still make these deep runs. And the other element to the equation here, and something that I am factoring in just because of this specific team, they have arguably the best home field in the NFL. Like, that place is incredibly difficult to play. So that's why, I mean, that's like a very small part of it. But the roster, to me, would you argue any roster over theirs?
No, and that's the point here. And it's like, I agonize is strong, it's dramatic. If anyone says that you agonize over a decision on a podcast, like, just hit fast forward for a second. But when I talk about splitting hairs, you have the Bills with the best quarterback, the Broncos with the best roster, and then the Patriots with the best quarterback coach combination in the AFC that just is coming off of a Super Bowl run and might add one of the 10 best receivers in football. I have the Broncos too because Bo Nix might be the worst quarterback on this list. And CJ Stroud is the only one really in contention, maybe Trevor Lawrence. And it's really, really hard to have a team like that, number 2 or number 1 in the list. But not only do they have the best roster and a good coach, Jalen Waddle, I think, is going to help Bo Nix, who had one of the lowest ADOTs, average depth of targets in the entire league, as a player who, as you mentioned, is going to do a lot of the work after the catch. That's exactly what they need. And they might deal Marvin Mims, who also does this at a much like JV level relative to Jalen Waddle. Even if their offense was 15th last year, we talk about things being sticky. That's not indicative of how good they'll be next year, or not a good sign for how good they'll be next year. If you think they're the number 2 team, as I do, they won a lot of close games last year. I just think, again, it's hard to get around the fact that they have edges over the Patriots, clearly at pass rusher, right, with Nick Bonito. Now at receiver, I would say with Jalen Waddle. Pass protection with Garrett Bowles as your left tackle. And they have some issues in the interior, which Milton Williams and Christian Barmore exposed, don't get me wrong. And then they're about even at corner in Patrick Surtain. And all those things add up to they can win with Bo Nix as they did. And if he improves a little bit with a better weapon, that's why I had them number 2. Though oddly enough, unless I'm missing a part of my notes, I think they have the 6th best odds to win the AFC right now, according to the sports book that might sponsor your podcast off the bike.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it up. I was just looking at that.
Behind the Patriots. So there it is.
Yeah, I do think Vegas, for whatever reason, is sort of lower on the Broncos, which I don't get. I guess, do you think it is just the quarterback? Yeah, so plus 490 Bills, plus 500 Baltimore, plus 700 Chargers, plus 800 Chiefs, plus 850 Pats, plus 950 Broncos. So do you think that's what it is? It's just the quarterback?
Well, I think it's some of the stuff that I mentioned. Like, you have so many close wins by 1 score, and they pulled more rabbits out of more hats last year than anybody. So that's going to regress a little bit. Again, the offense was about average at the end of the season. You have an average offense, you're probably going to have an average football team the next year. It's the elite defense that is not as sticky year to year. And then the Knicks factor. But again, just the stuff on paper and the Waddle trade is the stuff that you look at and go, the continuity here is going to help them. They did lose John Franklin Myers, who was a big piece of the defensive line, but they just roll so many bodies in there. I don't think it'll be a devastating blow. Again, you could reorder the Patriots, Bills, and Broncos. I'm not going to be mad in any kind of order. This is just how I would set it, because the Bills should have won on the road at Denver last year, and Denver probably should have beaten the Patriots in the AFC title game. Like, maybe it's just that simple for as much time as we just spent on these 3 teams.
Yeah, the one thing that I would, and I mentioned this right when we started, the dynamic between Peyton and Nix is getting weird to the point where Peyton was talking about the injury, and then Bo Nix said he shouldn't be talking about the injury. And you go back before the draft, he loved Bo Nix. I believe it was Peter Schrager talking about it. It could have been on Bill Simmons' podcast, where they were talking about one of the things they look at is like the negative plays. They have this whole metric about how they evaluate college quarterbacks, about the guys that make the fewest negative plays. And Bo Nix was like number 1 on the list. And you heard like when Peyton was like gushing over the guy, when I'm like, this is crazy, trying enough to get Bo Nix. But it does feel like he wants like this certain specific quarterback to just like fill exactly what he wants to do, right? Like, and it feels like Bo Nix, it felt like he was that guy, but is Sean Payton like sort of falling out of love with the quarterback here based on some of the comments? Like that's the one thing, because he had stretches last year where he did not look good. Like he looked bad. He had some bad games in there, and they were still able to win because the roster was so loaded. It's kind of like the opposite of the Patriots during the regular season. I mean, we mentioned that Bills game that they lost, but how many bad
they
games?
would be the AFC Seahawks in a different way.
Yeah.
Like he's less risk. He's more risk averse than Sam Darnold is, but there's still an element of the team carrying the quarterback aside from a few big throws in the fourth quarter that kind of make a difference. So yeah, it is weird. Sean Payton's a weird guy. We should wrap here though, because again, I think if the Patriots do exceed expectations again, which is on the table, their over-under win total is 9.5, sixth best offense in the league. That's more likely to be repeated than any of the other numbers that you hear. Who on the roster, in your opinion, carries them, aside from Drake May, to a place that, again, none of us expect next year if they do get back to a 12-5, 13-4, 14-3 kind of range? Who's the surprise breakout kind of guy here, or a couple of them?
Okay, so I wouldn't say this is a surprise, but what if we just see that stretch we got from Travion where he's incredible? What if he can sustain that for the majority of the season if some of the stuff improves in terms of what we talked about, the pass protection? Because I do think, man, when you see him get in the open field, there was that game, I believe it was the Tampa game, where he just ran away from a corner. And you don't see a lot of running backs in the NFL. I mean, you can probably count them on your hand. Like, obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs would be the guy that comes to mind first. But that level of explosion, you just don't see that a lot. And he clearly has it. And he's not like it's kind of weird. He's not the most consistent runner. Like, there's a lot of runs where you're like, dude, like, you had room. Yeah. And he ends up, like, having either no gain or he loses yardage. But then he all of a sudden it's like, whoa, he just ran for 60 yards. He has plays like that. So he's so dangerous. And I do think the defense has to account for him. So I think that would be the first one. And then the number two one that I would throw in here is, obviously this is not counting for AJ Brown being here, but I just think and I talked about it earlier, I think there's more to Kyle Williams in terms of, I'm not telling you he's ever going to be a true number one receiver, but just having that legitimate bona fide deep threat. Because I think about, and I'm not saying he's going to have this career because this guy at one point was an all-pro, but think about Deshaun Jackson. It's not like he was running anything else besides getting down the field, and you just always had to account for that guy. It's almost like having a great three-point shooter where, hey, like if Sam Hauser's in the corner, you can't leave the corner or else Sam Hauser's going to get the ball and he's going to hit a wide open three. So if you have that legitimate deep threat, you always got to account for him. And even if you just hit one, if you hit one a game, the defense is always going to have to react to that. So that would be my second guy on the offense, would be him, just because I do think there's, and I know I already said this, but the way that they've talked about him, I feel like, and the other element, he's their pick. They picked him in the third round. That's their guy. And I love Booty, but a lot of his stuff is contested catches. Obviously, him and Drake have great synergy, but just from a pure athleticism, speed perspective, Kyle Williams has more to offer in terms of just being this explosive guy that can get down the field. And they had all these veteran receivers, so I get why he didn't have a lot of opportunities last year. But when he did get his opportunities, I would say he made the best out of them. He's basically in the end zone half the time.
Yeah, I mean, he'll have a tough battle here with Romeo Doubs probably playing X, and them is his best position. But we'll see. I mean, that's what training camp's for. That's what a year two leap is for. I like the picks. I made mine earlier this week in a mailbag episode, and I think Corey Durden's the guy that would have to kind of help cover up what they lost with Kyrus Tonga, and then the event of any injury to Milton Williams or Christian Barmore, which maybe they sustained better than what I outlined. You mentioned Kyle Williams. That got me thinking, because naturally we get a lot of questions about, receivers in the draft. Who do you like at 31? And I was like, kind of mealy mouth. Like, do you like Denzel Boston? But Casey Concepcion and Omar Cooper is really good. The more I watch Casey Concepcion, I just think I'm overthinking it. Like, the drops are here and there, but there's an element of he just destroys press coverage like Kyle Williams did a year ago, except he's doing it in the SEC, and there's more yak to his game. So he's not a perfect player. They want bigger receivers. This is me going on the record. He's kind of my guy of that group, and I know other people like Denzel Boston more. That's fine. There's just a keep it simple, stupid element to watching this guy, Casey Concepcion, and how dynamic he is at Texas A&M. So anyway, that's where I'm going to end. If they outperform expectations, you're going to get contributions from rookies like him, just like the Patriots got contributions from rookies like Will Campbell and Greg Woodson all season long. All right. He's Brian Barrett of The Ringer. Listen to the Off the Pike podcast. You're about to have a busy week, my friend. Red Sox next week. Tatum is still rolling. Patriots, AJ Brown stuff pops up here and there. What else we got coming? And when?
Yeah, I'm excited. We'll be putting again Sunday after the Celtics Minnesota game. So a ton of Celtics stuff still on the docket, obviously, with Tatum coming back. And then I just did a huge pod on Thursday that's out now with Julian McWilliams from CBS Sports. We did a whole breakdown of the Red Sox. I think I'm drinking a little bit too much of the Kool-Aid because it came away from the pod. It's like, does this guy think they're going to win like 110 games or something? I'm not. Look, I think they're going to go over their win total, which I think still is at like 89.5 or something. I just think they got to really like the Suarez thing is a little bit weird, but they have all this depth in terms of the starting pitching. The young guys look awesome. Durbin's had a really good spring training. So I'm excited about the Red Sox, man. I feel like we're finally going in the right direction. And if they just didn't say all the stuff they said in the offseason, I would have said it's actually not a bad offseason. Like my number one target would have been Alonso. They obviously didn't get him, but I like Contreras as sort of a guy that can fill in. And then I like Durbin at the price that he's making compared to Bregman. And if you ask me, and look, this doesn't look great now because of the spring training and the WBC, but I would rather give Suarez $150 million than give Bregman the deal that he got based on the age and based on the injury he was coming off last season. So like in a vacuum, I think they actually had a good offseason. They just can't get it right PR-wise. Like PR-wise, it's just a disaster.
Yeah. Putting that aside, I still would just love to have a conversation with Craig Breslow, who is obviously deeper into the numbers than I am. Again, like admitted, not a pinky. I've been going to games since the mid-90s, but like unreasonable Red Sox fan. Those two players you mentioned, William Contreras and Durbin, had to come over via trades. Can you just sign guys for a little bit more money and keep the assets? And then you have everything. And then you can use those assets and other trades maybe at the deadline for the pieces that you need. You can just spend the money and only lose money and not lose money and draft picks and young players, or not picks, but young players and prospects. They've done that so many times. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Red Sox. Listen to Brian all the time. You know you will be back. I appreciate you coming on today. This was fun. And good job by you having the Patriots just a spot higher than the host here, who I'm sure is going to get a lot of flack for the picks. But look, it's been March. We can hang. Thanks, my man.
Anytime, Callahan.